It began without a sound. No grand explosion, no warning from the scientists. Only a subtle shift in the familiar light. The moon, our silent guardian, started to change. Its glow was no longer a soft silver reflection. It became a cold, analytical stare. People first noticed it in the dead of night. They would wake up feeling watched. They would look out their windows and see it. The craters and seas on its surface seemed to rearrange themselves, slowly, deliberately. They formed something that looked disturbingly like an iris, a great pale eye opening in the blackness of space. This was not the moon we knew. The poets had written about its beauty. Lovers had sworn their vows under its gentle gaze. Now that gaze was different. It was ancient and intelligent. It held no warmth. It held no romance. It was the look of a predator studying its prey from a great distance. The change was so slow that many dismissed it as a trick of the light, a mass illusion. But the feeling was undeniable. A cold dread began to seep into the collective soul of humanity. The familiar night sky was no longer a comfort. It had become a source of profound and nameless fear. Astronomers were the first to truly panic. Their telescopes, once tools of discovery, became windows into madness. They saw the lunar surface ripple, not from impacts or geological shifts, but with something that looked like thought. Dust and rock moved in impossible patterns, like muscles flexing beneath ancient skin. They recorded data that made no sense. The moon's orbit began to deviate by fractions of a degree, a cosmic wobble that defied all known laws of physics. They tried to warn the world, but their words were lost in a sea of disbelief and growing unease. How do you tell people that the sky itself is waking up? The animals knew first, of course. They always do. Wolves no longer howled at the moon. They whined and cowered in their dens. Nocturnal birds refused to fly, remaining silent in their nests. Even the insects seemed to hold their breath. The natural world sensed the shift. It recognized the arrival of a power that was wrong, something that did not belong in the gentle cycle of life and death on Earth. Humanity, wrapped in its concrete cities and artificial lights, was the last to understand. The silent scream of nature was a warning we were too deaf to hear, too blind to see. The fear was not just in the sky. It began to infect the Earth itself. The oceans, so loyal to the moon's pull, became erratic and violent. The tides no longer followed their predictable rhythm. They surged without warning, swallowing coastlines in monstrous waves. Then, just as suddenly, they would recede for miles, exposing the seabed like a gaping wound. Sailors spoke of whirlpools forming in calm seas and strange melodic sounds rising from the depths. The moon's gravitational leash was no longer a steady hand. It was the twitching finger of a mad god playing with the waters of our world. This celestial awakening twisted the natural order. Seasons began to blur into one another. The magnetic poles of the Earth flickered, causing compasses to spin wildly. Migratory animals lost their way, flying in circles until they fell from the sky in exhaustion. Plants, governed by lunar cycles, began to grow in strange, unnatural shapes. Their leaves were pale, their flowers sickly and misshapen. It was as if the very blueprint of life was being corrupted by the moon's conscious gaze. The world was becoming a reflection of its new master, unpredictable, alien, and deeply unwell. The unknown is a fertile ground for fear. And what could be more unknown than a celestial body we thought we understood? For millennia, the moon was a constant, a symbol of stability in the chaotic universe. Now, that stability was gone. It was replaced by a terrifying question: what is it, and what does it want? This uncertainty was a poison. It seeped into every aspect of human life. People were afraid to go out at night. They were afraid to look up. The fear was not of an attack, not yet. It was the fear of a profound and cosmic wrongness that we were powerless to comprehend or stop. The moon's light, once a gentle guide in the darkness, now carried something else. It was a kind of radiation, but not one that our instruments could measure. It was a radiation of the mind. It affected dreams, turning them into nightmares of empty space and falling forever. People became paranoid, irritable, and prone to strange compulsions. They would stand for hours, staring at the lunar eye in the sky, their faces blank. The world was not just physically in chaos. A quiet, creeping madness was taking hold, a tide of insanity pulled by our awakened, watching moon. The psychological toll was immense. Astrophobia, the fear of the stars and celestial space, became a global pandemic. It was no longer a rare anxiety disorder. It was the default state of the human mind. The night sky, once a canvas for dreams and exploration, was now a source of pure terror. Children cried when the sun went down. Adults sealed their windows, trying to block out the sight of that terrible, watching eye. The very concept of the cosmos, of the vast empty space beyond our atmosphere, became a trigger for crippling panic attacks. We were trapped on a small rock, under the gaze of something incomprehensible. This was cosmic horror in its purest form. It was not the fear of a monster that could be fought, or a villain that could be understood. It was the horror of realizing our own insignificance. We were not at the center of the universe. We were not even a noteworthy part of the story. We were simply an audience, or perhaps an experiment, for a consciousness so vast and ancient that our entire existence was a fleeting moment to it. This revelation crushed the human ego. Our religions, our philosophies, our science, they all seemed like the naive babbling of children in the face of this silent, cosmic truth. The whispers started soon after. They were not sounds, not really. They were thoughts that did not belong to you, appearing fully formed in your mind. They came only at night, when the moon's light touched your skin. The whispers spoke of impossible geometries, of colors that did not exist, of the cold, silent eternity between the stars. They showed you glimpses of the universe's true nature, a place not of wonder, but of endless, uncaring emptiness. A place where things like the moon slept for eons, and their waking was a cataclysm for lesser beings like us. People tried to resist. They built underground shelters. They lived in windowless rooms. They created artificial suns to hold the night at bay. But there was no escape. The moon's influence was not just visual, it was gravitational, psychic, fundamental. It pulled on the iron in your blood just as it pulled on the oceans. It resonated with the water in your cells. The whispers did not need to travel through the air. They traveled through the very fabric of your being. We were connected to our tormentor, chained to it by the laws of physics and the fragility of our own minds. The final revelation was not delivered in a grand speech or a clear message. It came in pieces, through the fractured minds of those who had stared too long at the sky. They began to draw. They drew pictures in the dirt, on walls, in their own blood. The pictures were always the same, a great round object, the moon, with tendrils reaching out towards a smaller sphere, the Earth. And on the surface of the moon, they drew gaping maws, like the mouths of deep-sea fish, opening in the lunar dust. The eye was not just for watching, it was for seeking. The truth was simple and more horrifying than any complex motive. The moon was not angry, it was not evil, it was simply hungry. It had been dormant for billions of years, a cosmic seed adrift in space until it was caught in Earth's gravity. Our world, teeming with life, with energy, with consciousness, had been its incubator. We were the warmth that had finally caused it to wake. Our collective psychic energy, our emotions, our very life force, this was the food it craved. It was a predator, and its hunting ground was the minds of humanity. The whispers became clearer. They were no longer just abstract horrors. They were a call, a siren song. The moon was pulling at us, not just our bodies, but our souls. It promised an end to fear, an end to pain. It promised unity, a merging with its vast, ancient consciousness. Some people began to welcome it. They would walk out into the open fields at night, their arms outstretched, their faces turned to the sky. They saw it not as an end, but as a form of ascension, a release from the prison of their individual, terrified selves. Now, as the moon hangs in the sky, its eye wider than ever, we understand. It is not waiting to attack. It is waiting to feed. It is slowly, patiently, drawing the spirit of our world into itself. The earth will not be destroyed in fire and brimstone. It will be hollowed out, left as a silent, empty shell, its life force consumed. And the moon, satiated, will simply close its eye and drift back into the cold, silent void, leaving us behind as a ghost planet orbiting a ghost star. The true horror is not that the universe is hostile. It is that it is indifferent, and its processes are as natural and as final as death.